Welcome to Real Talk, Indiana's premier talk show on real estate investing, where we talk each week about investing your money right here in Central Indiana. The tips, tricks, do's, and don'ts, brought to you by CIREIA, Central Indiana's oldest and largest real estate investing association. Hello there. My name is Vicki Perry, and I'm the Executive Director of CIREIA. We have over 600 members, all active in or learning how to be active in real estate here in the Indiana market. This radio show is available on FM 95.9, AM 950, podcast on YouTube, and www.cireia.org. Join us each week as we talk about how you can make your money more active with better returns and help the community that you live in with real estate done the right way. Now, on with the show.
And welcome to Real Talk. This is the only local real estate investing radio show where active investors discuss real estate investing done the right way every Saturday and Sunday from noon until 1 p.m. I'm Ron Watson, president of the board of directors of CIREIA, and your host today. We're going to be discussing some of the headlines that are affecting the real estate investing world, and you can check out how to contact each of our co-hosts on our website at cireia.club and find out how to reference some of the materials that we're going to be talking about. And joining me today in the studio are Dave Short with Century 21 Sheets. Dave's an investor, a realtor, coach, mentor, and one of the most sought-after rehabbers in Central Indiana. Welcome, Dave.
It's great to be here.
And also in the studio is Brian Snyder, operations manager for Simple Wholesaling, one of the largest wholesaling companies in the state of Indiana. Welcome, Brian.
What's up? What's up?
It's good to have you in here. And Sterling Davis, owner of Athosity Property Management, managing now over 500 doors in Central Indiana, and vice president of the board of directors for CIREIA. Welcome back, Sterling.
Hello.
Well, guys, I know last show that we did, we talked a lot about how to do a deal, how to buy a property, all the steps involved, cash and pre-approvals and all those kinds of things. And today we're going to pick up on that discussion a little bit too. Before we to get there, I thought we'd start on the opposite end of that scale, which is what are some of the mistakes that first-time home buyers make? And so I've got a report here that I thought I would reference, and then we'll go around the room and comment on each of these. I'm sure some of you may have run into some of these situations along the way. So this report outlines, I think 10 costly mistakes which could put a hold on that sold sign. You like that?
There you
okay. First of all, knowing what you can afford is number one. Skipping mortgage qualification, failing to consider additional expenses, being too picky, lacking vision, being swept away. I'm sure that happens all the time with you, Sterling, right? Compromising on the important things, neglecting to inspect. I know we're going to talk a lot about inspecting and appraisals as well in this show, and not choosing to hire an agent or using the seller's agent, and not thinking about the future. So these are just some of the things that people run into in terms of mistakes that they make when going into a deal. Anything stick out for you guys that you wanted to start with? Yeah, Sterling, what do you got?
Yeah, just starting with number one, not knowing what you can afford and things like that. I find it interesting with this article. It talks about not tailoring your house hunting to properties in neighborhoods that might not be financially in your budget, right? So when I oftentimes I talk to investors, I recently just walked a property with an investor, and the whole time she's like, I'm like, what's wrong? She's like, I could tell that she was not really excited about the house and properties that we were looking at. She was like, well, I've been looking online at these properties and and she sent me the properties. I was like, well, these are far out from your budget, and these are multifamilies. These are different from the criteria that we created. And I think what she said to me, she was like, well, Sterling, I just can't imagine living in this type of house. And I was like, well, I think that is a mistake. You're looking at it as if you're going to be living here. And it's not about what you are accustomed to. It's what that community is accustomed to, right? There's certain houses in certain neighborhoods that doesn't have AC. And let me tell you, my wife would never live in a house that doesn't have AC, right? So I can't buy things predicated on the idea of what I will live in.
Yeah, so from the perspective of an investor, right?
Right.
I got you. So, she was just thinking about it in terms of what would be palatable for her to live in, and not necessarily from the investment perspective.
The investment perspective, where it's not something that you would live in, but will this get the necessary ROI that you're looking for? And I think we have minimum standards and stuff. It hits our minimum standard, but she just wasn't accustomed to houses not having certain amenities.
Right. I mean, I buy a lot of houses that I would not live in or walk around, but they're great investment opportunities for somebody else and things. And you're kind of talking about that. I see a lot of people that basically, when they kind of have that mentality, like, oh man, I don't know about this neighborhood, or I don't know if I really want to be a landlord in this area or whatever it may be. Sometimes that causes them to stretch their budget and then get into another area that's a little higher priced, a little high, kind of out of their range. And all of a sudden they can't afford that anymore, and then they're strapped, and they can't. They wanted to get 4 houses in that neighborhood, but now they can only get 2, and then what are they going to do? And then it's not covering what they want to. So I'll also just kind of go into with knowing what you can afford and what you can and stuff of what you get a pre-approved for. That doesn't mean you have to spend that much. I see a lot of people kind of stretch that out, and I think
we can do it. We can swing it, right?
Exactly.
The lender said I can.
Yeah. Or you have the spouse they're not on the same page when they're trying to go through the negotiations and stuff.
Yeah.
I was like, I can be at 100. No, I think we can do 115. So yeah.
Well, it's an interesting article because this works for both somebody that's buying a house to live in, but also from the investor perspective. I know, Dave, you talk a lot about this when people look to invest or maybe buy a flip. Buying off more than they can chew is a big mistake.
Well, I think we tend to, a lot of especially the rookie investors or newbies that don't have a lot of flips under their belt, and I still make the error too, is that they don't get an inspection and they've figured everything in the world that can go wrong with this house that I'll have to spend to repair it, and then they'll add a 15% budget as a contingency factor, which on a $50,000 rehab is what's that, $7,500, and then as soon as you start demoing, your contingency budget's gone because you find knob and tube wiring in the house. So
right.
All of a sudden you've got $800 budgeted for electrical and switches and stuff, and now you can easily be at $7,000 to put knob and tube in the house, where if that investor had spent $300, he could at least had that in his budget that he knew. A lot of the insurance companies today won't insure a house that has knob and tube wiring in it.
Right.
But even more important than that is most buyers won't buy a house that has knob and tube wiring in it.
Yeah.
So you have to look at it. Hey, I'm going to fix it, and there's no way around it, because a prudent buyer with representation is not going to buy that house.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Like when I think we can create our own list here too, right? Like, one of the things I see is trying to do the same strategies in different areas. Like oftentimes people don't realize, like, my management strategy inside a lower subpar 600 neighborhood is different than a management strategy for 1,000 and above. I give the same quality of service, but how and what we do inside of it is just different. In the 600, we heard it before, like my renter center model, where I rent them things that I wouldn't be able to get away with that at 1,000 above. So these strategies, though, are set in place for me to limit risk and to avoid certain situations. So I think as investors, when you start looking at these biggest mistakes, some of your biggest mistakes is making sure you're using the appropriate strategy, or even looking at the most appropriate when it comes down to number, like caps and ARVs and ROIs. What are those cash on cash? What are those numbers should be versus what you want it to be?
I like this number 5 here, because this is something I struggle with, and it's termed lacking vision, right? So you look at a house, and like a lot of, like the woman that you described, Sterling, who looked at the place, I wouldn't want to live here, but maybe she lacked the vision of what it could be or what it might be in terms of revenue generator or whatever. I know, Dave, you're really good at this, as you flip a lot of houses. You see something and you say, well, I know I can do this, and I can do this, and so you're able to not, you can get past the front, the lack of appeal when you walk in the door.
Even in Sterling's business, and the buyers, these buyers, even investors, if I would say for the most part, if they own under 10 houses, they're basically buying at a different vision than the people that own 30 or 40 or 50 houses.
Good point.
They
yeah.
have taken the emotion out of it at 40, 50, 60 houses. But at 10 or under 10, they still have that vision. Perfect example of, we had one in Irvington, and it was just a 1-bedroom, had a basement, very, very nice house, but we did an extremely good remodel of that house, and we put it on the market as a lease at $850 a month. Well, the market says it might be $725 or $750, and then so when we went to sell the house, saying that $850 was the rental, I got pushback from other agents. Well, we're doing our research on here, and we only think that it rents for $725 a month, not taking into consideration the aesthetic appeal of that house.
Right.
So, I told the agent, I said, well, what should we do with these 4 applications at $850 a month that we have? And they were
touche.
Good credit scores, very strong credit scores. So, but we give them a product and we sold this house to an investor, and it was still a 7-8% cap in a strong neighborhood with no work needed theoretically for the next 10 years.
One of the things I kind of want to talk about too is kind of going along with that lacking vision.
Yeah.
It's kind of playing along with that, like the people that have maybe too much vision and don't know their own capabilities.
That's a good point. Yeah.
So we see that all the time of where we'll pick up houses and buy them because it's that story of like, man, we bought this house, we thought we could rehab, we ran out of money, or it ended up being too big of a project, or all those kind of things. So and you have everybody's kind of has in that frame of watching HGTV and watching them remodel all these shows, and not knocking those shows at all because they've brought a lot of people into our industry and stuff, which is great, but also kind of a realistic impression of what can really happen with these. And I see a lot of people that maybe they'll want to do the drywall on their own, but it takes them a month. Well, just hire it out. It can be done in probably like 2 days for the cost of what you're holding that is probably going to be better.
Right.
So.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think being swept away maybe is number 6. That's kind of part of what you're talking about, right? Is they have the vision, but it's not correct vision. It's just it's
and you should be able to do it in 30 minutes. Like it's like, what? No. What do you mean? I think when I start looking at failing to consider additional expenses, I have so many times had this conversation with owners when we do our evaluation of their property at the end of the year. Immediately it sometimes get blamed on us, and it's like, well, Sterling, I was only budgeting this much for my maintenance expenses, and it's like, well, you should have known when the inspection said the life of the water heater was this, the furnace lifespan was this. Did you budget for those items? No, we didn't really budget because they said the house was rented. It's like, well, just because the house is rented doesn't mean that those things won't go out. And oftentimes I see people when they do their cash on cash return, right? They say, well, I'm going to get 10%. This is going to be great. But they don't worry about those soft numbers, vacancies, and items like that. So
I want to kind of talk to you, Sterling, just a little bit about when you're dealing with new investors that are looking for that, just using that buy and hold strategy of when they have a rent of let's say $750 a month or something like that, where they actually expect to get $750 into their pocket versus some of those costs that are in there.
Yeah. I oftentimes I ask people that question, and I love when people are like, oh yeah, I just want to get $100 of cash flow a month. I'm like, yes, $100. That's realistic.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
right. You can deal with that.
200. All right, 200. We can deal with it. Right?
But I'm looking at 500 and it's a 750 rental.
Yeah,
not going to happen. Probably.
Not going to happen. I think those are things that newer investors are really struggle with. The idea of and that's where the struggle of even seeing a managing of a duplex versus the managing of a single family, or the management of apartment unit versus the management of a single family, right? So these people say, oh, I want more cash flow, I'm going to get a apartment building. But apartment building have so many other factors that go into it. If you don't account for those things, then you will be in the red quickly. Like, so I oftentimes see people trying to use these same strategies and same management style. And that's kind of the reason too why we only manage specific type of properties, because we can cost you money. We understand we can cost you money if we're not up on, like, if a multifamily is above 50 units, it's managed differently. You might even have in some states on-site person over after 25 units in other states, and that's a different management style for us if we have to place somebody on site to start managing your property.
Well, one of the things that we see, and the thing that I like here is the compromising on the important things, which goes with every transaction that we do. If you're buying your first house, you're buying your third house, you're buying an investment house, you're buying a multifamily. Perfect example we had at the multifamily, and it was it was a pretty big unit. It was 20 units. Inspection came back really good. It says it's a flat roof. The roof has 5 to 6 years left. And I said, okay, that's okay. Let's get an estimate to do the roof. Well, we've got 5 to 7 years. I said, well, you have to start budgeting today, because this could be a $50,000 roof that you're putting on this building.
Yeah.
So we have to budget $8,000 a year for expenses that's going to occur in 5 years. Or if you sell it, and if you resell this unit in 5 years, the inspector's going to come back. Roof is at its expected life and needs to be replaced. So that's an expense that you'll reflect. So you have to think about those, and I think people make compromises on important things. And I tell investors who are buying a new house, furnace comes back that it's 13 years old. Well, it can probably go another 3 or 4 years, but as a flipper, I want to put a new furnace in that house. So I need to budget that, because I have to, our opinion in flipping is you have to take all maintenance away and hard costs, expensive costs, for at least 10 years. Mm-hmm. So if it's a 15-year furnace, then I'm going to replace it because I know it won't last 25. Right. Same with air conditioning. Air conditioning, people don't realize furnace and airs don't last the same amount. Furnaces are 3 to 4 years less from expected life. Hot water heaters, and you look at what looks like a brand new hot water heater, if it's 7 years, it only has a year left, statistic. So most people don't look at that. They'll compromise on this. Well, I can get it fixed. I really want this house. Mm-hmm. But these are things that we all have to look at.
How about the opposite side of that, Dave, where you see kind of in your industry when you're flipping houses and you have buyers walking through and everything like that? You get like the other side where there's basically being like too picky of like, hey, I can't compromise on this because this wall was white. Like I don't like it. It needs to have color, or like just random stuff where people are just being a little too picky in certain areas.
We'll basically do what we can do to keep a transaction win-win. So if it costs me $150 to paint a room, the buyer's perceiving that's $300 or $400 to paint that room. So I can make compromise, and I'm willing to make compromises on all of our flips to get the transaction. There'll be certain things that a buyer, will come in and say, well, I want this done. And I just said, well, it's not reasonable. I don't think it's reasonable. So I'm willing, no hard feelings, to let you go find another house. Yeah. And so a good flipper has to be willing to walk away from every one of their pending sales if it becomes unreasonable what a buyer may expect. And they may be right, but you can't afford to do it to the tune that they want to get it done.
Right. No, I think what I see when we start talking about biggest mistakes, right, is taking shortcuts when you shouldn't. I know we were talking about like inspections, right? Not having an inspector do the inspection, but having your GC, because I trust him. He should be able to do it, right? It's no reason why an inspector got a certificate or anything. Like, you know what I mean? Come on. Taking shortcuts, like not having a property manager. I'm not saying that you should, but you still need to know the law. Like, I've seen people that we've taken over, and they're like, I'm like, hey, did you run a background check on them? No, but I talked to them and they're good. Just always trying to find different ways not to spend the money. And it's like certain things, it's just worth the money that you spend. Like, so stop avoiding certain, like, I think you talked about, Dave, like how much an inspection is. Like, a guy I talked to yesterday, he did an inspection on a property, and I went out there and I said, this is horrible. This house is not made for a first-time investor. And he said, Sterling, thank you. That was the best $400 I spent because I didn't get stuck with a house that was going to cost me more than that.
Right, and so it's a longer-term view of that investment, and so knowing what the goals are up front and what you're trying to do, it's not, because I think people get focused on the short term a lot of times, and I can make the purchase, I can fix a couple things, and like Dave was saying, or like you said, Sterling, there's all these other things that could happen, and eventually they will. I mean, maybe it won't happen in that house, right? That furnace will last another 5 years, but as you do more and more, that they're going to happen. The law of numbers work.
Typically, I get burnt, and every investor gets burnt when he compromises on what he thinks he can get by with on the house. So we just try to approach all the flips that we do. We're not trying to get by with anything.
So we're going to talk more about the mistakes that you can make. I know we wanted to transition into some things like appraisals and inspections, but we're going to take a quick break here, and we'll be back after this message.
Hello to all our CIREIA and Freedom 95 listeners. Fortunately, the weather is turning nicer. Unfortunately, now here come the bugs. Termites are swarming this time of the year. A lot of people get them confused with flying ants. Termites are black and have wings and very similar to flying ants. A termite is more elongated without a pinched waist, where ants do have a pinched waist. And of course, termites can do a substantial amount of damage to your home or business. The termite swarmer's job is to leave the colony and start new colonies. The workers never leave, they only just keep on eating. So for all your pest control needs, give us a call at Bugs Be Gone at 317-945-2965 or visit us at bugsbegone.net. That's B-U-G-S, just the letter B, G-O-N-E.net. Or find us on CIREIA.club for your premium discounts.
At Traders Mill Grill and Bar, we are redefining the sports bar experience. We're on the northwest side of Indy at 5650 West 86th Street in the Traders Point Shopping Complex, with more than 20 HD TVs and 2 113-inch big screens for all the games. But at Traders Mill, you don't have to be a sports fan to have a good time. We have a full menu of fresh, scratch-made food, including salad, steaks, sandwiches, pizza, and more. Enjoy excellent service while having a drink at our full-service bar in a clean, comfortable environment. We're open 7 days a week at 11 a.m.
Welcome back to Real Talk. My name is Ron Watson, the president of the board of directors of CIREIA, and we are talking today with Brian Snyder, Dave Short, and Sterling Davis. We were talking about some of the biggest mistakes you can make from an investor or even a first-time home buyer, but I think they apply to the investors' world pretty thoroughly. And one of the things that we talked about here is being a little bit short-sighted, failing to consider additional expenses, and one of those is really the lack of doing some things that you really need to do, like an inspection. And I want to talk about inspections now and appraisals and all that whole process. So what's the value of the inspection? What kinds of things are we looking for? And how does that help you in terms of making decisions? Anybody want to start with that one?
Yeah, I mean, I find as a investor broker, it's really important to get an inspection. It's going to be able to give you insight of the life in which these items are, right? Like, they're not going to tell you how to fix it, but they're going to make you aware of the condition of the property, right? Oftentimes, I think as investors, they don't really understand the different function between a inspector and a contractor, a general contractor of sorts. The inspector's job is more to identify, hey, this is a furnace. It looks like it's from the last service date is 10 years old or 15 years old. You should probably have it serviced by an HVAC company to be able to see the functionality of it. Hey, this is the life of a roof. The roof looks like it has like some hell marks or stuff like this. You probably should have a license, you should have a roofer take a look at it at this point. It has 2 shingles versus one level of shingles, right? So I think it's very important to utilize inspections in your inspection period inside of your purchase agreement, and utilize a true inspector, not cut corners and have your general contractor. What I had to do is I have my inspector and my general contractor talk and communicate. So I know that he can do the function, and he just works off that list, and he gives my investors a quote based off of the inspection items.
Well, one of the things too with inspections, and I think it's obvious that if you're a buyer and you're buying your home you're going to live in, get an inspection. 100% of the time, not 95% of the time. So I'll flip it to my side of buying a house before I do it, and addressing a newer inspector. The inspector that I hire, the cost is somewhere $300 to $400, but I tell my inspector on a house that I'm buying, even though I've maybe said I'm going to buy this house as is, but I want an inspection, pick this house apart. I want to know everything wrong with it, and do it like be as hard on this house as you can, because I want to know what I have to fix, and it's really, really important to me to get an accurate scope of work on this particular house. If it has 2 shingles, I want to know pretty close how close it is. If it has 3, I definitely want to know, because I know I need a roof and needs to come off, and and a new roof put back on. So I can accurately, get a scope of work. And the only way you do that, and the secondary thing of that, even though we may have bought it subject to an inspection, and maybe we still have bought it as is, it's not saying that if they won't fix it, if it needs knob and tube wiring and they've said it didn't have it, you can still go back to them even on an as-is sale and say, look, I've got a $6,000 electrical bill that I wasn't counting on. I can't buy your house at this price. As is doesn't mean you have to buy it at that price. You'll just accept it as is, and you can use that as a negotiating tool to get the price down on the house if it's reasonable.
Because you still have to disclose it now. Now that they know it's knob and tube wiring, the seller is going to have to deal with this issue.
He has to deal with it if he sells anybody, and he may get another investor who will, like we talked about in the last segment, compromise on important things. Mm-hmm. He may get that guy, but he's still, by law, has got to tell him that, hey, it has knob and tube. I didn't think it did. So that guy's going to look at it the same way on it. So that's kind of the things we have to look at. But it becomes a really good negotiating tool for an investor trying to buy a flip.
Yeah, that's what I always like about the inspections too, is I want to know what's going on with the house, but I also look at it as a negotiating tool. So I can make an offer, and then I kind of get them locked down for a period of time, and then I know they're going to find something in that process. Right. It may not be that a major deal, but it's something that I can use to say, okay, well, we need to fix this, or I need some more money, or you need to change your price, or whatever. So I like it as a negotiating tool as much as anything else. There's a discussion in this document that I'm reading here about an inspection, a seller's inspection or a buyer's inspection. Is there any real difference there, Dave?
Well, the only difference really is like in a lot of our listings that we take, we actually encourage the buyer or the seller to get a home inspection before the house goes on the market, and then they can address stuff that may be wrong with the house prior to going on the market. But it also they may find something that could cost them $5,000 or $6,000, and they now can reflect that on their listing price, what price that they can take, knowing that they may have to do this, where they may get an offer that they really don't want to take on a transaction, and they'll go ahead and take it, and then they get the inspection, and now they're going to be dinged another $5,000 on something. Had we got a pre-inspection, we could get it done. I mean, it's like, we have guys who treat mold that are trained to treat mold, but they're not licensed mold mitigators. Mm-hmm. So if we know we have mold, we'll treat it, let the inspection come in, and then we probably don't have that issue and might save 50% on a mitigation circumstance on it. And I would rather, if my furnace is 20 years old from my cellar, I would, say, hey, let's replace the furnace now, because we can put the furnace we want in and not the furnace, that
the buyer wants.
A buyer may want a train unit that's $7,800, or we can put in just an efficient unit, but an off-brand that might cost us $4,800.
Right.
So we can get ahead of it.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times too, like kind of bringing up that buyer's inspection report and the seller's inspection report. There's a lot of times that we might buy a house and we might be given an inspection report, but I've seen a lot of inspection reports that are very different if you sit them side by side.
Oh, yes. What are you trying to say, Brian?
Right. But like Dave was saying before, just like when he wants his inspection report, he tells him like, hey, be super hard on the house, do whatever you need to, like pick it apart. Sometimes it's if you're buying a lot of houses and you kind of have a rapport with an inspector and they're just kind of going through and they kind of know what you're doing. Right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So everybody's inspection report, maybe, I'm not saying that people are trying to leave things out or anything like that, but just they're different. They're different people, they're different opinions and stuff like that of kind of going through that. So like, we were saying of like, if you're buying a house, you definitely want to get that inspection report for yourself, not necessarily just taking one that was given to you of like, hey, this has been checked off, it's done. So
no, I think what I started seeing recently, and maybe it's been going on for years, is that the inspection contingency is not a get out of jail free card. You know what I mean? Like, it's an inspection contingency. If you see on like the MLS purchase agreement, man, that inspection language, Dave, it's just gotten really long. Like that at one point was like 2 sentences, like inspection period, this is what we do. Now it's like, no, you can't get out unless it's something that's going to hinder the value of the property and all this length. Like, I mean, that's just something that is very frustrating when you're trying to sell houses where people are.
Well, there again, it takes a good agent to have control of their part of the transaction on these inspection items. As a flipper, we tend to get, what I would consider ridiculous requests on a house that are maintenance items and not, things that affect the habitability of that particular house. And we get pretty frustrated as flippers, but we also tend to do what it takes to get the transaction closed. If I have my handyman there and in 2 hours he can fix these 5 little things, then okay, I'm not happy about it and it's not reasonable, but okay, the buyer, that buyer, that end user, he's in an emotional state right now, and he's walking a tightrope, thinking that there's a big river behind if he falls off. So he's just looking for a way. It's like, okay, well, if they can't do this, then I can't buy the house, because they put it in their mind that it's reasonable, and even though it may not be reasonable.
I want to kind of put you on the spot here a little bit, Dave, but what's like one of the most ridiculous things you ever seen, like as a request that like that should be fixed?
I've got, we had one that we're closing in a couple weeks where they came back that the light switch was cracked on the entryway light. Well, the light switch plate that was cracked cost 32 cents to get and put it on there. And the one, I mean, it goes on and on with little stuff like that. The nameplate that came off the exterior doorbell is cracked, or the flashing in one of the areas of the some stuff that it was cosmetic in nature on the inside of the house, needed to be sealed and repaired. Jesus. I mean, it was like these were $8 and $10 and $12 items.
So we're going to give you a credit of $15.
So, but it's like the other agent didn't even. It's kind of like they didn't even look at what they were putting on the report. Exactly. I called her back and I said, "The crack light switch." I said, "Really? Are we?" I said, "You're talking about the one in the living room I just sent you a picture of." Well, yeah. And I said, that's 39 cents. And I said,
plus labor.
Yeah, plus labor, and my guy will be there, so we'll go ahead and fix it. But then all of a sudden seller's agent wants 3 estimates by licensed contract. So it's, I mean, it's like, okay, but we get a lot of ridiculous stuff. We as flippers try to, get tunnel vision, and if we can do it at a reasonable thing, we just do it.
So that's a good place to stop. We're going to take a quick break here, and we'll be back in just a minute with more information.
Do you have a house that you want to sell, but you don't want to fix it up before you sell it? Or you need the cash quickly? Or you just inherited Aunt Susie's house and don't know what to do with it? That's what Dave Short does. He buys houses so you can get on with your life. He pays cash, closes quickly, and buys in all Central Indiana. For details, call Dave at 317-590-4499 or email Dave at bshort@c21sheets.com. That's spelled C21SCHEETZ.com.
Are you looking for a career change or a life change? That is the mission behind Simple Wholesaling, the leading provider of discounted properties in Indianapolis. Simple Wholesaling is all about making the process simple for buyers of properties, sellers of properties, and members of the Central Indiana community who want to generate wealth, free up time, and then help you use that wealth and freedom to make a difference in the world. Check them out at www.simplewholesaling.com or email Brian@simplewholesaling.com or call 317-494-7211.
Is this you? You've heard about landlording and you love the idea of a steady stream of income from real estate, but you're concerned about tackling the 2 a.m. calls and worrying about renters who don't pay their rent on time? That's where the pros at Ethosity Property Management take the hassle out of investing for you. They handle the toilets and tenants for over 300 local rentals and are happy to help you with yours. Call Sterling at 888-212-3764 or check out www.ethosity, that's ETHOSITYPM.com.
And welcome back to Real Talk. My name is Ron Watson, the president of the board of directors of CIREIA. And today we're joined in the studio with Dave Short, Brian Snyder, and Sterling Davis. And we just started talking about inspections and some of the things that you can require and what you're looking for and some of the really important pieces of information there. So I thought we'd go down further into this topic and really understand more about what needs to happen here. Can you talk about, Dave, maybe start with what should the buyer be there and how long this might take and just kind of a general overview from that perspective?
Well, we would encourage a buyer to be at the home inspection. They're paying quite a bit of money for it. We act like it's not a lot of money, $300 to $400, but it's certainly money well spent and it is expensive. But we actually want them to be there so they can understand. Something written on a piece of paper by a home inspector can seem very, very daunting and just so much more money than it is. But if that buyer's there, the inspector says, yeah, this is something you should look at and maybe try to do in a couple years so it doesn't become an issue. But if the buyer's agent is not there and the buyer is not there, then all of a sudden something on that report looks very daunting. So I think it's very important for that buyer to be at the home inspection.
Yeah, I mean, they get to hear that explanation is key, right? One of the other things I say is like read, the MyBoard document for it in ZipLogic is changing. I mean, I feel like every time I pull it up, it's updated. You know what I mean? So I think you need to really read into that what it says. And one of the things that I always see that it says is that the buyer must give the seller a chance to remedy these issues, right? And I've been in situations where I didn't give the seller a chance to remedy it, but it was an as-is deal, and he was like, we got a disagreement about this. I was like, well, you said it was as is, so I didn't even want to bring it to you. So here you go, the mutual release. But if you fix it, so it's really important for you to really understand what that time frame looks like, right? And making sure if you need that extended time that you send over the document saying, hey, I need 7 more days for my contractor to go out there and quote it, and then find a win-win solution for it.
I wholeheartedly agree. I mean, it's like once they've written an offer and got it accepted, with few exceptions, the transaction should close. Mm-hmm. It should close if everybody's done their job. And, I know we're going to transition into the appraisal part of it, which is the next, the next part that we like to cover that's a real integral part of the transaction.
So I wanted to read here the 7 major things that home inspectors look for, just general categories, but water damage, structural issues, old damaged roof, damaged electrical system, plumbing problems, insect and pest infestations, and issues with the HVAC. So those are the general categories. What are some things that they don't look for? I know we had some discussion sort of off the air about minor things, cosmetic things, really, and those are not things really that inspectors are trying to uncover, right?
Well, they typically note cosmetic type things on it, and agents tend to all of a sudden try to make them more structural, or so that the house is habitable or not. But some of the things that the inspectors almost always defer in their inspection, they say we may see signs of biological issues, mold. So they're not going to address something that's out of their field. Asbestos is another one. They showed potential signs of asbestos. So they're going to defer that to other types of inspectors to come and look at it. They may defer sewer issues on sewer lines. I mean, they don't know if the sewer line's unclogged or clogged up, especially if it's a vacant house and hadn't been lived in for a year. So they'll defer a lot of stuff to other people, but yet it's stuff that we as investors should take notice that, hey, we may have to deal with it if a house has been, I know I'm going to have to snake the lines and hope they're not broken down if the house hasn't been lived in 5 years. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't matter if it's well, septic, or city utilities.
Yeah, I think, everything on your inspection report you should take the time to look at. And what we've done, especially with our I see a success with our certain investors where they kind of even make those action items into an Excel spreadsheet and make it into a maintenance plan that we kind of cover over 3 to 5 years that we address at some point.
Yeah, I would also just kind of like to put out there too, like, you don't want to be that guy or that buyer that's basically out there and get your inspection report back and then you're just basically just going through and hammering the seller on like, oh well, I need a mutual release unless you fix this and this and this. Like, if you're going to put that kind of as is, and you're going to put that, even though you're getting an inspection, you still know what you're buying. You still kind of have an idea for it. You don't want to just kind of be that kind of overbearing person when it comes to that type of thing. So.
Especially in the investor community, right? Because you want to be doing more than one deal potentially, right? So you're not wanting to create problems and conflict out there. You should work together with people, make it easier for you the next time.
Yeah, Brian, do you have anybody specifically you would like to name?
And phone numbers?
I got a list right here.
Let's go ahead and go down your list.
That just plays into, we've talked about it plenty of times before, just like how your reputation is everything, just the way you do business, the way you do deals. I mean, it's going to carry throughout, from one deal to the next. So.
No, I mean, that's something that I see often is not understanding that this is a negotiation, but this can go further than that. Like, Dave always talks about a win-win situation. Mm-hmm. That win-win situation is not just for my deal, because let me tell you, when we get in this room together, we're like, hey man, have you done deals with such and such? And you're like, yeah, I had that same experience, and I'm sure it happens in other communities, right? Like, this is our industry and this is what we care for. If you had a bad experience, you're probably going to tell somebody, and that goes further than the good experience, right?
That's kind of funny. Actually, I just had I was talking to a wholesaler who we're kind of working with and kind of helping out her along the way. She's new and she's learning, but she was at the gym the other day and 2 other wholesalers were on the treadmills beside her. They didn't know who she was, but she kind of knew who they were, and they were having discussions about their companies, and they're pretty big and stuff like that, but kind of like having these conversations of talking about, hey, did you do this with this person? So it's a small community a little bit here in Indianapolis of the investors, and like I said, that reputation, you want to make sure you're kind of doing the right thing and make sure you're standing by your word. And if you get that inspection report back, there may be some things on there that cause you not to do that deal, and that's just that conversation of being open and transparent with each other through that process. I know sometimes when there's an agent involved, sometimes that can get a little tricky, but once investor have that conversation, but then even when there is that agent involved, of just be open, talk to them, go through them, and it's never a deal breaker. Just find that win-win situation, like Dave says.
So I wanted to transition to appraisals. This is the next step in terms of, we talk about inspections, and then appraisals are also something that we should spend a little bit of time on. And talk about how that process works and how that can affect you as far as being an investor. David, would you want to start that conversation as well?
Well, the appraisal is, from my point of view, is an extremely valuable part because it gets me the money. And, what we look at, and we do a lot of different things to try to make sure we get value by running comps, knowing what our fair market value is. So hopefully we don't have appraisal issues, or if we, quite honestly, we've oversold some houses, their market value, because there's been multiple offers, but the history says that the house might not be worth that much. That's the biggest thing, and the biggest knock on appraising today is sets value on history. Well, our history is changing every 2 weeks now in the real estate market, and it's like value. We establish value as what I'm willing to sell for and what somebody's willing to buy for. That's value. And now we have a third-party person in there that says, okay, I don't think you guys are right, even though that person has maybe looked at 20 houses and lost 15 to try to buy a house. Then we have a third party telling us it's not worth value. Well, and even from an investor standpoint, when you look at, if you get an appraisal $1,000 or $2,000 or $3,000 low, that takes $3,000 out of our net. Where if the buyer pays $3,000 more, then their payment's only $20 more a month on that money. So it's small. It's small numbers for a buyer, even though it's long term, but it's big numbers for an investor. And that $3,000 could be 30% of your profit on the transaction. So that's why we need to be very careful and cautious and try to assure that we get market value on our houses. Contrary to what most investors think, or most people who look at us as flippers, we don't make $15,000, $20,000, $25,000, $30,000 a house like they do on HGTV.
$65,000 net. Yeah, I think, I find it interesting because a lot of times appraisals come when you're doing a deal with a bank or a hard money lender, but I definitely see the value of utilizing it when they're not, because they're using it for a reason, right? They want to put a value to the property in which it's going to be lended, so that, all right, this deal doesn't go right, this is where we're at, right? So I think appraisals are just so important, and that's why the top guys, the lenders and the hard money lenders, have you do it, right? And then some hard money lenders even have you do the after repair value. So if you make these repairs, we think that house can increase to this value.
Well, and that's how hard monies make their decisions based on what they'll lend you on houses. And that's almost a whole show trying to get into the minds of a hard money lender on how they make their decisions, because, and we've talked about, I feel like
the mind of a hard money lender is like a clown, and he's kind of like do like, sorry.
That was Sterling Davis for all of you hard money lenders out there.
Well, they do tend to, but they don't make the same decision as an owner-occupant buyer.
Right.
They're looking at credit report and the stability of the house. And the hard money lender is looking at almost just the stability of the house without regard to the credit report.
Right.
That's why they can get 10, 12, 13, 14% returns on their money with 5 points. They're paying double what an owner-occupant buyer would pay for that same loan.
I thought it was interesting because I've dealt with this several times with as a seller, get a low appraisal. If accurate, it means that you have to lower your home price. I have an agent in my office. She just came to me yesterday, and her seller, it has a lower. It was a $100,000 ask. The buyer came in at 103. Appraisal comes in at 97, to what Dave's talking about, and she's like, "Man, that's a $6,000 swing." And she's like, "Well, I rather." It was like, "Well, now that's appraised there. Are you really going to send a mutual release over the 6,000, where now you will have to, disclose and list it for the 97, perhaps?" and she's or sell it to a cash buyer. You know, so she's really struggling with the seller is the idea that she would have to now sell her house at that lower value.
Well, we get that a lot, and it's one of the one of the things how we handle these kind of transactions. But in the same token, sometimes as a flipper, if they bought it VA is probably the hardest value to get today. And the reason is the VA comes from a specific pool, and they tend to be, there's a lot of really good VA appraisals out there, but a lot of them tend to be what I call not market current. And so sometimes you get a lower value on a specific property. And we had one that happened in Garfield Park area. It's a really, really strong neighborhood. We sold a VA for $150,000, and the VA appraiser was from Terre Haute. He come in and appraised my house at $135,000. And so the deal, I just go back, and the buyer wanted the house, and they changed financing when FHA got a new appraisal and appraised at $151,000, appraised overvalue.
Wow.
So it was, but we had an appraiser that understood the market in Garfield Park,
Right.
and we got value.
Right. So we're going to take a quick break here and finish up with the discussion on appraisals and the rest of the show after this.
Are you wanting to get started in investing but don't know what to do first? Maybe you took one of the National Guru classes, but you're still confused. Our members are doing business locally, and they remember that they were beginners at one time too. Start by joining the biggest and oldest real estate investment club in Central Indiana. Take our classes and network with people who love what they do and are willing to help you through the startup stage. Check out CIREIA.org. That's CIREIA.org.
Insurance companies say they're going to be there for you when life happens, but the truth is things can get pretty complicated fast when it comes to a personal injury accident. The steps you take after an unexpected crash are crucial. You need help every step of the way. Hey Andy, this is Dave Ramsey. I've been talking about the Randy 7-ish difference for several years now. For 34 years, Randy has helped thousands of people through their worst circumstances. Randy stands as a shield in between you and the insurance company. So even if you've started conversations with the insurance company after an injury accident, talk to Randy 7-ish to make sure you're not leaving money on the table. If you or someone you know has an injury accident, whether you're a pedestrian, passenger, driver, or rider, talk to Randy 7-ish first. Call 317-636-7777 for a no-obligation consultation. 7-ish Law, fierce protectors of the injured. 317-636-7777 or 7ishlaw.com.
And welcome back to Real Talk. My name is Ron Watson, the president of the board of directors of CIREIA, and we're wrapping up the show today. We talked about appraisals and inspections, some really good information for investors, and I thought we'd start with kind of go around the room and start with Dave Short. Give us your best information or tips related to appraisals, and then contact information. We'll go from there.
Well, my tip of the week from appraisers, and I'll give it from the investor standpoint or flipper standpoint, when we have an appraiser going to a house that's going to appraise it, I try my best to meet them there.
Oh, you're taking my tip, Dave.
And so that way you can, he can see your face and everything. And it's always nice if you bring him coffee too.
Oh, okay.
So then he has to be a real hard ass not to give you value if you bring him coffee and a roll on it. But best contact for me is it's David Short. I'm at C21sheets.com. I guess it's D Short at C21sheets.com.
Thank you, Dave. Sterling, since he took your tip, why don't you see what you come up with?
All right, on the fly here. No, I think piggybacking off what Dave said is I deal in a lot of distressed areas, and so if you're dealing in a lot of distressed areas, oftentimes you can get appraisals when you're doing things like the BRRRR that you just disagree with. And you can oftentimes challenge these appraisals by having the comps in which that you had beforehand and kind of have that conversation with the appraisal person so that give them context and hopefully it's some room in there that they can make that change. Sterling Davis, Ethosity Property Management. You can call me at 888-212-EPMG. Once again, that's 888-212-3764.
Thank you very much, Sterling and Brian Snyder.
Yeah, Brian Snyder with Simple Wholesaling. You can email me. It's probably the best way to get a hold of me at just brian@simplewholesaling.com. Feel free to check out our website as well. Any of the resources on there may help you out if you're getting into real estate investing. And I'll just go ahead and jump on the bandwagon kind of with you guys. And on the show, many times we've talked about just kind of building a rapport, being able to ask questions and things like that. So when you're able to do that, whether it's an appraiser, an inspector, anything, just get into them, just kind of build that rapport with them, build up that relationship, and that allows you to kind of be a little more comfortable with those questions you can ask, have that kind of personal side to it. So that way you can kind of go back and forth. And if you need to bring coffee, donuts, or just whatever, like Dave suggests.
Coffee and donuts. That's awesome.
Yeah. I know that definitely gets Sterling on board.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, okay. So thanks, guys. I really appreciate that. And I did want to mention that if you've missed previous episodes, you can listen to them on the CIREIA channel on YouTube, or go to CIREIA.club, which is CIREIA.club, and click on the Resources tab for copies of all of our episodes. On May 2nd, the CIREIA monthly main meeting will be one of our favorite events of the year, the annual roundtable event. We have 14 tables around the room with local experts at each, talking about different topics that are important to real estate investors. Attendees go from table to table to ask questions and network with successful investors like the gentleman in the room today. This meeting is open to the public, and you can register at www.cireia.club. I did also want to thank Fox 59's digital team for allowing us to use their studio today. We really appreciate that and hope that we can do this again soon. My name is Ron Watson. You can visit me at Traders Mill Grill at 5650 West 86th Street on the northwest side of town. Love to have you join me there. Thanks, everybody, for listening today, and have a wonderful week, and hope to join us again next time.